Meeting's being recorded. Okay. Continue.
All right. There's some people still coming, but I want to honor Robert's time. I want to honor the time that you guys are given. I know it's Friday, last Friday of the semester for us. So thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging in. Thanks for being supportive. Um, so how should I do? Rob, Robert is like one of my favorite people in all of CUNY. When I see him at events, I have to run over and give him a big hug. When they were forming all these leadership programs a million years ago, we sat in a room with a small group of people and made a lot of the decisions about what was going to happen across the campuses. And he works at CSI and has had a great program out there. And one of the greatest privileges in my entire time of being at Hostos was to be able to bring 4 students out and volunteer collaboratively with the CSI program on a Saturday, I think it was, collecting food and bringing it to the food bank out there. So I really do value him as an individual, as a professional, and I trust him to bring you insightful, thoughtful, creative ways to think about things. And in our society today, the really important aspect of cultural competency and being capable of understanding how you fit into the what's becoming the new normal is really important. And so when we talked about what workshop we should do today, Robert and I discussed it, and we thought talking about what cultural competency is in today's world would be a great topic to finish the semester on and give us some inspiration as we go off into the winter and come back to the spring for those who will be back. And so I will share with you now my good friend, Robert King Key, who is a wonderful individual, and he will take you on a journey for the next hour and 15, 20, half hour, as long as it takes. So I give you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is great to be here. Thank you for having me. And on behalf of the College of Staten Island, the Office of Student Life and our administration, hi, welcome. I am honored to be here today. It's really, CUNY, as wonderful as we are, one of the challenges that we have is that we work in silos. So oftentimes, we don't get to interact, our students don't get to interact as much with other students from other boroughs, and our faculty and staff don't get to interact as much. So when Jason had put the ask out to have facilitators come, I jumped over and I was like, I'd love to. And so it is a privilege to be here today to hang out with our students and to hear and feel and help facilitate your growth and your thoughts. I take leadership very seriously. I've been the coordinator of leadership development at CSI for about 13, going on 14 years now. And when Jason talked about, we started our leadership programs, 12 years ago or so, we really had a vision of where this was going to come to fruition or what it might look like. And there's another part that we had no idea what it was going to look like. And so over the years, I know his program's changed, mine has changed. So it's really an honor to kind of see how students think about leadership in other parts of CUNY. I'm spoiled because I love our students at CSI, and I think in CUNY in general. And so to be able to just kind of jump into another university and just kind of know that the students are creative geniuses and smart and hardworking and really all about growth and making a difference just warms my heart. So there's my philosophical introduction. I am from Staten Island, originally was born here, moved to Jersey as my formative years with my mom. Went to Penn State undergrad, graduate school at Temple. I was doing a PhD in sociology, and then after 8 years, started working, and then started consulting for the government, doing leadership consulting all over the world with the United Nations, and that was great and loved it, and I missed New York. And so about 13 years ago, I applied for a job at CUNY in leadership development. It was the first we'd ever had. in our area, and they said, we'll give it a shot. And so here I am 13 and a half years later. I am currently in our inaugural doctoral program in community-based leadership, because I feel like we'll talk about today that our learning never stops. You should never stop learning and growing. And especially we're talking about leadership and cultural competency and the work that we have to do in our world. There's a lot of work to be done. And so I felt like I needed to be prepared to be able to prepare our students and to be a catalyst for change in our communities, which I know after talking to some of you this afternoon that many of you already signed up for that same job description. So without further ado, I'm just going to tell you what my teaching philosophy is, and we're going to jump right in. So I hate going to workshops where you've got one person talking throughout the entire time, who thinks they know all the expertise in some subject matter. And I'm not that guy. Right now, I'm looking at a screen that's got about 15 students, 14, 15 students, and I suspect that some others will join us this afternoon. So my expectation is that as you all come and get into the conversation, I would hope and expect that you all will participate and share your ideas, and that you have something to teach to the whole group. I kind of look at my job as keeping this room safe, especially when we talk about diversity and cultural competency. There may be some ideas or thoughts that may make you uncomfortable, and that's okay. Stretching and being uncomfortable is good. But as long as the room is safe for people to share their ideas and be heard and respected, that is my primary responsibility. I look at it this afternoon. I'm going to show a couple videos, kind of put you in a group later on, a couple breakout groups, have you think about some questions, given the content that we talk about this afternoon. And then I'm going to ask you all to join a breakout group and have your breakout groups do a presentation at the end. So there'll be 2 or 3 questions I'll ask you to report out to the entire group, and then we'll close it off that way. So without further ado, let me share my screen and just show you what I had in store for us this afternoon. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So today we will have a quick icebreaker. Then we'll talk about cultural competency, diversity. We'll talk about why they're important. Why does Jason and I feel like it was even important to bring this subject up in a leadership context. We'll talk about racism. Just that will be the lens in which we look at cultural competency and diversity. And then we'll talk about the different types of racism. And then that's when we'll break you out into your small groups, breakout groups, and we'll have you do some little bit of work in your small groups. And then we'll have you come out and do your presentations to the large group. So just kind of where we're going. And also let me just put out there too. So there are lots of isms in our world: racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, a whole lot of oppression playing out and manifesting itself across a lot of it intersects and still manifests itself. In no way, shape, or form am I arguing that racism, which will be the lens that we talk about today, in no way, shape, or form am I arguing that racism is more important than any of the other isms. They all manifest differently. They're all equally important. They all impact and allow people to feel inferior and excluded and shut down, and it has adverse impacts psychologically, emotionally, mentally, physically, economically. They all manifest very differently, and they're all drastic and disgusting. And in no way, shape, or form am I pitting one over the other. So we're not going to play oppression Olympics today, but it will be the lens in which we approach the topic of cultural competency and diversity. At some point, we're going to talk about the 4 different levels of racism: the intra, the inter, systemic, and structural. When we look at those, I just want you to keep in the back of your mind that we could use the same model that we talk about today for racism. We can talk about that same model for sexism, heterosexism, homophobia, classism, that it plays out the same. So if we're talking about internalized racism, we could also talk about internalized sexism or internalized homophobia. So these dynamics will play out interchangeably. So just, again, making sure that people understand that today we're just going to talk about contextually, we're going to talk about race, but we very easily could expound that to talk about class or language or heterosexism or transphobia, you name the ism or the obia, we can apply it. All right. So I want to get started and have a little fun. Are you all down with that? All right, I'm gonna take that as a yes. And so this is also an invitation, not a requirement, but an invitation. So as someone who's extremely visual, I know that CUNY also has a lot of beautiful people. So if you would just like to share your cameras, I would love to see your beautiful faces. It is absolutely not required. It is an invitation. This is a challenge by choice. So I will keep mine open. And it also helps as a facilitator to be able to engage and kind of know how you all are doing with the content. So I know if someone has their hand raised or if I have a video on, it's helpful to be able to see some folks. So if you'd like to share your beautiful faces, I'd love to see your beautiful faces. It is not a requirement, but just an invitation. Voila. All right. Now, I'm going to put up a sentence. And is everyone here, before I put it in on the screen, is everyone here familiar with the American English alphabet? Fantastic. Is there anyone here who is not familiar with the American English alphabet? Just making sure, because excellent, excellent. Okay, I know it's like a silly question, but I need to ask it because I'm going to make fun of y'all in a little while because I know some of you are going to get this wrong. All right, so Yanira, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an open book test right now. I'm going to put up a sentence. I'm going to ask you to read this sentence, and I'm going to ask you to count the number of the letter F, as in Frank, as in football, as in fancy, the letter F. I'm going to ask you to count the number of Fs in the sentence that I put up. All right. And as an open book test, I'm going to put the answer up in the corner. I'm going to give you 35 seconds to read the sentence and count the number of Fs in the sentence. All right. So your instructions are: 1, read the sentence; 2, count the number of Fs in the sentence. Okay. Read the sentence and count the number of Fs in the sentence. All right. So let's put that up. You'll have 35 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Oh, sorry.
A. Isabel, A.
Oh, hold your answers to yourself. Keep your answers to yourself. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, time. All right, so I want you to put your answers in the chat. All right, so write your answers in the chat, the number of Fs you saw in that sentence. 5, Isabel has 8, Yanira has 9, Kiswin has 7, Zanaya has 8, Suskamani has 9, Hansita has 7, Sarah has 8. Anybody else? Denise has 9, Sarah has 8, Abdul has 9, oh, Henry has 8. Oh, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. All right. Who knows that they're right? With a show of hand, who absolutely knows that they're right? Jason thinks he's right. All right. Yanira, I saw this. What does this mean? Does this mean yes? You don't know. Tiana, or 4. Okay. All right. I need to know who thinks they're right. I mean, it's simple. Jason, what was your number, Jason? 5. Jason has 5. All right. And Leighton, what do you think?
5.
5? All right. Anyone else think 5 is the right answer? Tiana, you think you're right. Where are you, Tiana? I'm looking at the squares here. Tiana thinks right. Has said 6.
I'm here. I'm just in the post office. I think it's 6 because
think
I
it's
also
6.
included the 2 F's that you had at the top, the 2 blue ones.
No. Just this in the sentence. Just in the sentence.
Oh, so if it's just in the sentence, then 5.
5.
I think it's 9.
You think it's 9?
Yeah.
All right. So right now we have a little conflict because I gave this same test to CSI students, and I have to tell you, I think they did a little bit better, just a little bit, not much. I think they all got it wrong too. I think there might have been one person that got it right too. So I'm going to give you one more time. I will tell you that every single one of you got it wrong. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 45 seconds. I'm going to repeat the instructions one more time. You are to read the sentence and count the number of F's in this sentence. Not on the page, not up top. The top is just so it's an open book test. So you know what let's clear it up. I'll tell you what, I'll just take it out so it's easier for all of you. We're going to share the screen. I'm going to give you 45 seconds and you're going to give you more time this time. And you will count the number of F's in the sentence. So I'll get rid of this. So we're not talking about this little F up here. We're just talking about in the sentence. All right, 45 seconds, go. "35 seconds. 30 seconds. 25 seconds. 20. 15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time. All right. So everyone, please go to this chat, put your number in the box. Isabel has 4, Anthony has 7. Sukmani has 11, Jason has 5. Henry Edwards has 5. Monsita has 6. Gizwind has 7. Abdul has 5. Fatima has 5. Yanira has 11. Sarah has 11. Huh. All right. So as you can see, the numbers have ranged from 4 to 11. Last time the numbers ranged from 4 to 9. So our numbers, oh, Tiana has 5. Okay. So I will tell you again that this is a really funny experience for me when I give this, that most of our students, no matter where they are, where we are, get it wrong. Or at least if I put it this way, if I put you all up to a lie detector test, how many people think they would pass the lie detector test? Most of you, right? So yeah, so it is often this really interesting experience that our perception oftentimes determines our reality, all right? That how we perceive things defines our reality, all right? And so I'm going to put up this, and Tiana, I know you think it could be 6 because of the sounds of the PH makes an F, but I didn't say how many words sound like the letter F. I said how many F's are in the sentence, but that's a really good observation, Tiana. Thank you. Anthony, I'm going to put it up and we're going to do it together, all right? So here we go. Let me share the screen again, and I'll read it out loud and we'll count them together. All right, here we go. the amount of 1, frigging, 2, fun, 3, that I have facilitating, 4, a fantastic, 5, virtual cultural competency workshop, 4, 6, the phenomenal students of, 7, Hostos Community College of, 8, CUNY in the United States of, 9, America is beyond comprehension of, 10, mind, body, and of, 11, spirit. How many F's did we have in the paper, in the sentence? 11, 11. Look at y'all rocking out 11s. Wow. Now, isn't that amazing how when we first looked at it, like we saw a sentence, and here we have 16, 4, 8, 12, 16, 17, 18. We got a couple more people coming in here. We got like 18, 19 people looking at the exact same thing, and yet most of us are seeing something completely different. And not only that, most of us are seeing something that's flat out wrong, right? Like our perception is we could have passed a lie detector test and we still would have been wrong, right? And so I love doing this exercise, right? Because oftentimes what's missed when we're doing this are the words of. Like many times when we spell OF, of, all right, it's spelled OF, but in our brains register that F and of as a V. So it sounds like OV of, but phonetically, right, it sounds like a V, but descriptively, it's an F. All right, so how many people miss the ofs in the sentence, or at least one of the ofs in the sentence? Right, and so that's one thing that happens, that many of us miss the ofs. Second off, did any of you feel that I was starting to rush you or put any pressure on you by counting down on the second time? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. So do you think that we do better when we're under pressure, or do you think we do better when we're relaxed and chill?
I think it depends. Each person is different.
Okay, talk more about that, Tiana.
Like when it comes to work, I can work under pressure. I can work at like high speeds, or if there's like a high volume. So that's like easy for me to like, I can do like 10 different tasks all at once and still like pay attention to my clients and make sure that I'm servicing them. But when it comes to like academia, I need to take my time. I need to be relaxed in order to make sure that I'm like doing everything correctly, and also that I'm observing the information and like actually understanding it and processing it.
That's absolutely right. Thank you, Tiana. Yeah, she nails it. Like most of us, generally, we do better when we are relaxed, when we are not rushed. There are some of us that are able to multitask and handle things at a fast pace, at a speed when things are thrown at us. Some people are able to handle that well. And most people still do better when they're relaxed. We tend to miss more when we're stressed, or when we're being yelled at, or when there's energy, when people are yelling at us, all of a sudden the hairs on the back of our head stands, or our heart races, right? And we start to lose our focus. And so however the conditions are, we are affected by lots of different things. And so in this particular example, how you process information, whether you are a visual learner or an auditory learner, makes a huge difference in the number of F's that you see on that sentence. If you are a visual learner, someone who processes with your eyes, you can read the sentence and you'll see the F's in greater numbers than people who are auditory. Now, generally, we're all some combination of both, but we generally will have a preference of one or the other. So the auditory people will read that sentence and it will say the United States of America, right? And although you're visually seeing it as an F and of America, your brain will process that OF as an OV because you are more auditory than you are visual. And so just the way you process information impacts how you show up and how you see. There's an old book, an old adage that says, wherever you go, there you are, right? That we bring with us our identities, our history, our stories, our learning styles, our passion, our race, our gender, our identities. We bring that with us wherever we go. All right, so if I picked you all up out of New York City and dropped you off in Tokyo, or dropped you off in Seoul, South Korea, or in Beijing, or in Manila, Philippines. It doesn't matter where I dropped you off, you're still going to see through the same lens and process with the same brain through the same cultural context that you have grown up with as compared to wherever I put you. So wherever you go, there you are. And so there's this adage of just because you don't see your identities or your biases play out, doesn't mean they're not there. All right, here we are all looking at the exact same sentence. We're all looking at the letter F, and we all see something very different. All right, there's an old analogy that police talk about that you can have 3 people standing on a corner and witnessing an accident. How many stories are you going to have? 4. The 3 individual stories and then the truth. All right, because the truth is going to be some combination of all those 3 stories. All right, each person brings their own biases and perceptions, and most of the time, even though our hearts are in the right place, we're going to see and experience things very different. All right, and that's a perfect example of how we look at society, right? Like we have so many people thinking Donald Trump is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then other people thinking he's the Antichrist. And so people are going to see things through their own biases and their own perceptions. All right, so with that in mind, I just want you to keep that F idea in your head, that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. All right, and so if someone says, I think what you said may have been heterosexist or homophobic or racist or sexist or something, that perhaps don't knee-jerk it, but try it on and say, well, what makes you say that? And then reflect about, just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. Okay, so just keep that as a paradigm. Let's see, what can we jump into next? We were supposed to talk about what is cultural competency. So let me ask you all before I put up a couple answers. What do you think cultural competency is? We thought it was important, so let's start with you. What's cultural competency mean to you?
Tolerance?
I'm sorry?
Tolerance?
Tolerance? Okay, we'll take it. It's a good starting point. Thank you, Leighton.
To understand that every culture is different and, still respect their differences,
Great, thank you.
When you keep your own culture and you spread another cultures, such as your kids, your friends, everything, students,
Thank you, that's fantastic.
food, music,
Food,
etc.
music.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? What does cultural competency mean to you?
Different religions, different, yeah.
I mean, like Buddhism, Catholicism, Judaism. Is that what you mean, Maria?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so if that's what we think cultural competency is, what do we think diversity is?
I think diversity, I'm Isabel, sorry. I think diversity is the different nations, the people. Example, I am from Peru, so America, different ethnicities like Africa, like Asia. This is my opinion.
Thank you.
All inclusive?
Yes,
All inclusive?
all inclusive. I like that, Leighton. Thank you. Leighton coming in with the one-word answers. Anybody else? What is diverse? Let's see. Yanira says variety. Great. We'll take that. Yanira, thank you. Anybody else? What does diversity mean to you? Jesus. All right, Maria, did you want to jump in? What diversity is to you, means to you? All right, we'll come back to Maria.
Opportunity.
Jesus says opportunity. What do you mean by opportunity, Jesus? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
I mean, I have a good idea, but I don't really know how to explain it yet. Like,
Well, you want to give it a try? We can help you out as you go if you get stuck.
feeling like like you have a chance because there's people like you, or maybe in the sense of like you can relate to them, or you guys have things in common. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Jesus. That's a good point.
What opportunity? Sorry to interrupt. What opportunity you guys talking about specifically?
Well, we're trying to extrapolate what people mean by diversity. So are you asking what Jesus means by opportunity, or are you asking just in general?
No, I joined just a second ago. I wanted to know what the question was.
Oh, okay, great. Welcome. So the question on the table right now is, what does the term diversity mean to you? So Tiara she dropped something in the chat. So Tiara says cultural competency is the ability to understand, communicate. Tiana, I'm sorry. I'm
No
just
worries.
glasses. Tiana,
No
thank you.
worries.
Keep me honest. Cultural competency is the ability to understand, communicate with, and effectively interact with people across cultures. Cultural competency encompasses being aware of one's own worldview, developing positive attitudes toward cultural differences, gaining knowledge of different cultural practices and worldviews, and that's your Google definition, so we'll take it. The practice or quality of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientations, etc. That's your definition of, the second one is your definition of cultural competency
diversity.
too?
No, diversity, yeah.
Just
I
making
could have
sure.
explained it in my own words, but it's basically like the same thing. And I just felt like it was unnecessary to explain it, because I believe that we all see diversity every day. And especially if you're like students at Hostos, we're really big on diversity. So diversity is something that we like definitely know like 100% strong about. And if our Hostos students don't, I am pretty sure that they will.
So you're saying that you all live diversity every day.
Yes, I would say so.
Great, thank you.
We live in one of the diverse like states.
That's
New
right.
York is a very, very diverse state.
That's right. Thank you. Mustafa, did you have any, did I pronounce that right, Mustafa?
Yes, sir. Yes, you did.
Great. Do you have any thoughts about what diversity means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tiana covered it pretty well, at least the definition of it. But when I hear diversity, I feel like a lot of people look at that, or I personally look at that as kind of like a comfort, like knowing that when I go to this place, I'll be accepted because, they have people from all different walks of life coming in and they're accepted. So it's kind of like a comfort to hear when you hear diverse.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think, when I go to places that aren't as diverse, I don't often feel very comfortable. I feel sometimes insecure, sometimes just like, do I belong here? But when I see and feel diversity, whether it's diversity of thought or diversity of race or ethnicity or orientation or languages, I just feel more at home. It's just what I'm used to, especially being from New York City, right? And then when I go to places that aren't diverse, it's really obvious to me that these places are not diverse. And then I feel like I stand out, like, okay, one of these things just doesn't belong here. Like, I feel like I'm out of place, out of sorts. So yeah, it is something that can bring comfort to a lot of folks. Tiana, thank you for those definitions, and they're very similar to what, and all those other people who shared what your thoughts were about diversity. I'm just going to put up a couple definitions that there's a couple foundations that I used. One's called the Boston Foundation, there's a Denver Foundation who had these definitions that I thought were pretty good too. So culture, just really kind of echoing a lot of things that you just talked about. And cultural competence is a set of values and behaviors that people play out amongst themselves, whether they're in organizations or their programs or a system or a city, which enable people to work effectively cross-culturally. It refers to the ability for folks to honor and respect each other, to respect our beliefs, how different they are, our languages, our styles, our behaviors, and that different cultures have different ways of seeing and processing and living in the world. And so for us to be able to talk about and react with and live with and interact with and be respectful of people of different races, ethnic backgrounds, sex, gender, or sexual orientation, class, age, ability, religion, language, that we have to have these values and skills to be able to be respectful of those differences, to understand that those differences, they may not look like ours, and they're different than ours, but different doesn't mean deficient, so that we can have a respect for people who are different than us. Diversity refers to the extent that people have different identifiable backgrounds or different identifiable thoughts, that we can talk about diversity just being frankly different. That there is a diversity of thoughts, so people have different perspectives about something, that there's a diversity of races or different people from different backgrounds. It just means that there are different types of identifiable backgrounds. We're talking about inclusiveness. It's something that oftentimes doesn't get talked about when we have these conversations, but really we want to be able to talk about the issues of inclusiveness, of being able to have people feel like they are a part of a community, and that community can be broadly defined. It can be broadly diverse. It can be made up of folks from different backgrounds with different perspectives, and that diversity is a strength of an organization. Diversity is a strength of a team. That we know teams that come from different perspectives or have different backgrounds or have different ideas tend to thrive, tend to become more successful, tend to be more financially lucrative. They're the teams that typically they go from good to great because they're able to then think out the box and process problems as they arise differently. All right. And so one quick example would be like 9 months ago, we went through something called a pandemic, right? We were called, our city was in a pandemic, and many organizations had to figure out how to do what once the pandemic hit. What did organizations need to figure out how to do 9 months ago? Adapt. That's absolutely right. And so if folks were used to doing things one way and didn't think about challenges and facing those challenges and creating opportunities out of the box, then those companies were doomed to fail. And there's a bunch of leadership books that came out like in the last 15 years that talked about how do organizations go from good to great, or how do organizations survive the test of time. And a lot of it is their ability to pivot and adapt. And as leaders, you're going to be faced with those same challenges. That you are going to be faced with how do you adapt when you are faced with issues and concerns and challenges that are presented on your teams, in your communities, in your country, and in the world, right? It is up to you whether or not you want it or not. You are our next generation of leaders. And so I'm saying thank you now for you trying to solve and fix the challenges that my generation messed up, or problems that we created that unfortunately they are now left for you to handle. And one way that you are going to be able to do this is by interacting with a global population, and especially at a place like Hostos or CSI or CUNY in general, where we have the most diverse student body in the country, if not the world, right? Being able to interact with and talk with and communicate with and work with and think with and play with and grow with and struggle with people who are different from you. And the more practice we get at doing that, the better off that we're going to be. And so it's something I want you to think about, that how is cultural competency a leadership characteristic, a leadership skill? Can someone answer that for me? How do you think cultural competency becomes a leadership skill?
I can take a stab at it.
Please.
I think that cultural competency can come as a leadership quality when you learn the benefits of it, when you learn exactly how to implement it in a way that would, one, include everybody, and two, create a workplace or a project space where I guess ideas and different thoughts on how to progress are, you know, motivated. They're shined on. So when you're able to take the traits of certain people that come from certain places and you know, build on it or use it as a team building exercise, then that becomes the I guess the glue that can hold a project together or hold a workforce together. So I think that's how it would become a leadership trait.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mustafa. That was awesome. Isabel.
I think this is fabulous for us. We are lucky to see in our Hostos Community College to see diversity students. That's great because I learned in the past some articles that people need to travel long ago. Sometimes students, if they are poor, they didn't know another diversity, another cultures, right? But now in our college, we need to see the different diversity. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabel. Anybody else? How do you see cultural competency as a leadership trait or skill to have? Anybody?
Yeah,
And
I'm
if-
going to talk. I'm going to talk. Can I talk?
Please.
Okay, so you said cultural. What's it for? I forgot.
Cultural competency? Or
Yeah, we need. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. We need to practice more of that because I am a criminal justice major in criminal justice. On my way to John Jay and got permit on my way to law school. We see racism in all parts of America. And me, a man of color, nobody practice that. And what is sad to see is the fact that as a man of color, many people, it's easy for many people to arrest, but it's not easy. It's just to use the phrase proven to be innocent. I forgot what it's called. Innocent to be proven guilty. No,
yes.
no, you. So no one used that phrase because culture, like the way he said, we need to practice more of it. And as a leader myself in Hostos Academy, as a student of Hostos Academy, I see like all my fellow leaders be saying that in Hostos and all colleges is more is more diverse. In all parts of every state is less. So, give me a sec. All parts of other states shows less diversity. When we go to Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, it's less. Other states is more, some of them are less. Now everybody has the mindset of cultural competence. The word sounds to mispronounced, but cultural yeah, you see what I'm
Cultural
saying?
competency.
Thank you, Tiana, for helping me with that. Appreciate it. Thank
No
you.
problem,
Yeah,
brother. You got it.
yes, I do. So not many people practice that. Some people has more of it. Some people have less. It depends on the background where the people are born. We'll be from this state or this country. We all born to serve under one nation. That's what Biden is doing. I'm not trying to mix politics, but Biden's what to unite the country, but the other president's name is starting to divide it. See what I'm saying? So it's all good. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You all are right, because you go to certain parts of the country, right, or even other parts of the world, and sometimes we don't even recognize or appreciate our own diversity that we have here. We kind of take it for granted because we see it every day. And at a place like Hostos, like you all, you can't walk on your campus and not see the United Nations in 30 seconds when you walk on your campus. And then you go to other schools, and you might stand out like a sore thumb because there's no one that looks like you, or perhaps no one who has a similar background as you. And so, yeah, we kind of can take that for granted here. And then that plays out differently for different communities, whether you're a man of color, whether you're a woman of color, whether you're in the LGBT community, right? And so these dynamics have a huge impact on people. And so being aware as a leader, you have to have an appreciation for folks that look differently than you, that think differently from you, that have grown up differently from you, or come from different places than you do. And that's an important skill to have as a leader, because you've got to be able to value and respect and make everyone feel like they are included, appreciated, so that they can show up and do their best for your team. All right. People bring all of themselves when they feel that all of themselves are being seen by others, or being respected by others, or being held by others, or being relatable or appreciated by others. I know that I always feel like I do my best and want to show up when I feel like people actually care about what I think, or what I feel, or where I'm from, or what I do, or how I see things, whether that's someone's experience or not. And so that is one of the most important leadership qualities that we can provide to people on our teams. And if you all are in this leadership academy, then you clearly appreciate the value of leadership and seeing yourselves as leaders, and how can you sharpen your leadership tool chest, or skills in your tool chest. The other thing we talk about is we briefly talked about creativity and thinking out of the box, and we talked about how the pandemic was a perfect example of how leaders had to be creative thinkers to solve problems that we haven't ordinarily faced. But oftentimes, when we interact with people who have a different experience or a different worldview, we typically expand our own world base. We also get to see ourselves. And often, I know some of you talked about learning about other people's cultures, or learning about other people's religions, or other people's languages or foods. That's part of cultural competency. But another big part of it is that we need to look at ourselves as well, right? That we have to look at what our own culture is, and what our own backgrounds are, and what our own beliefs are, and what our own values are. And quite often, we don't often reflect about our own. We're typically learning about other people's. But one way that we can learn about ourselves is by learning about other people's, because in comparison, we get to reflect about what we actually look like. I remember a couple years ago, I went on a trip for CSI, actually for CUNY. CUNY brought 14 faculty over to China for a month. And we were going to this place and that place and this place. And I remember we were in one airport, and I was running to catch the plane with my colleagues. And when you're in New York City, in the subways in New York, you get on the left side, the people start walking up the left side. And if you get on the right side, you just stay still, right? Well, I got to the airport in Tokyo. I'm sorry, I was in China. This one was China. And in Beijing, we got to the airport, and I'm running to catch the plane. And I get to the escalator, and everybody is standing still on the left side. And in my mind, I'm getting mad. I'm like, you guys are supposed to be walking. On the left side, you're supposed to walk. On the right side, you're supposed to stand still. And in that moment, I realized that my New Yorker was starting to come out of me, right? That how I look at things and how I operate and how I move in the world in New York is very different than how it was in Beijing. And so wherever you go, there you are. What your values and expectations and thoughts and beliefs and customs and traditions, that you take that with you wherever you go, and they just kind of become natural. And so when I got there, I didn't realize that I was the one that had to think about that I wasn't in New York anymore. And my implicit bias of what was supposed to happen or what the truth was supposed to be was all wrong. But it was in comparison and seeing and being in another place that I learned about myself, that I learned how much of a New Yorker I really am. I learned how neurotic I actually am, or how quick and rushing I am. I learned so much about myself by looking and being and exploring and learning about other people. And so that is one of the things that we also want you to learn about in terms of cultural competency and leadership, that it's an opportunity for you to learn about yourselves as well. All right. It's wonderful to be able to appreciate other people and other countries and other cultures and other nations and other ideas. And it's just as important for you to learn about yourselves and recognize your own biases and recognize your own values and your own customs and neuroses. But that's equally as important. All right. So I'm going to put on a video. So give me 2 seconds and I want to introduce you to my friend Lacey. See what Lacey has to share with us today.
Oh, hi, babes. Fun fact, I'm white. I know. Congrats, Lacey, you've figured out your race. But this is actually pretty significant. For most of my life, I was blissfully unaware of the fact that I'm white. My race never affected me. A huge benefit I didn't even know that I had. Growing up, I knew racism is bad, but I didn't really understand what racism is. I thought racism was slurs, discrimination, hating someone based on their skin color. About 50 years ago, direct, in-your-face, this overt racism became illegal and less socially acceptable, which had two side effects on white America. First, it allowed us to believe that racism is over. Yeah, I'm okay. I love that guy. Secondly, it enabled white folks to frame the ongoing struggles of the black community as a character flaw. So after Ferguson, a family member said to me, "Look, Lacey, black people have a lot of problems because they have a bad culture, bad values. They're violent, they're lazy, broken families. Look at them out there rioting like animals. That's not racism, that's just the facts." Whoa there, tell me how you really feel. Now, people usually aren't so blunt about it, but if you look closely, you're gonna see these sentiments about black America echoed everywhere.
So I taught school for 20 years. A lot of people of color who didn't want to work as hard, they wanted it given to them.
They don't make a living for themselves. They just drop out of high school. I'm gonna have kids. I'm gonna get a welfare check.
Get my GED.
I'll get my GED. I'm gonna go work at McDonald's.
Young black men often reject education and gravitate towards the street culture, drugs, hustling, gangs. Nobody forces them to do that. Again, it is a personal decision.
The message, to be black, is to be inferior. But that's not the facts, that's just racism. Racism isn't just burning crosses and white hoods. Racism is a seeping system of forces that effectively keep people of color in a permanent second-class status. It's the foundational fabric of our society, woven with values and attitudes, stereotypes, policies, economics, laws. Jim Crow was replaced with a host of shiny new laws that were just as racist, but looked better on the surface. This has made it harder than ever for white America to see the truth. The odds are ever in our favor, and they always have been. Let's take a stroll down memory lane. Stop 1. Wealth. Between 1934 and 1962, the government backed $120 billion of home loans. But they refused to give out home loans to black folks, or even if black folks lived nearby. This went on for decades. This practice, called redlining, essentially 1. Forced black Americans into poor urban centers, the beginnings of the ghetto. 2. Segregated America to this day. 3. Made it impossible to invest in the future of black neighborhoods. And 4. Made it impossible for black Americans to start inheriting property and wealth the same way that white Americans were. Stop 2. Education. Property taxes fund schools, which means that families that live in nice houses, maybe ones they got with the help of the government, get a better education. Better education means more opportunities, more resources, more connections, more jobs, more money, money, money. Stop 3. Jobs. The lack of educational opportunities meant that many black folks were relegated to low-wage manual labor. Today, when looking at the same exact resume, employers are 50% more likely to call back a resume labeled with a white-sounding name. Stop 4. Mass incarceration. Shortly after the civil rights movement, prisons became privatized for-profit businesses. Fill those cells, make those dollars, and they did. The prison population shot up from 200,000 to 2.4 million. More than any country in the world. And who filled those cells? People of color.
More African American adults are under correctional control today than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began.
Black men are now imprisoned at 6 times the rate of white men. So did black men just become 6 times more dangerous? Or of course not. What changed was the laws and sentencing. Sweeping laws were written that specifically targeted black communities. For instance, the sentence for possession of crack was 100 times harsher than the sentence for cocaine. Stop 5, racial profiling. It wasn't just harsher sentencing. Communities of color are also policed more harshly.
One of the few memories I have of my dad as a kid is seeing him yelled at and questioned by police on the street. And when they didn't like the answers he was giving them to their questions, they proceeded to aggressively question me. And I was just 8 years old.
Policies like Show Me Your Papers and Stop and Frisk target people of color under the law. Totally legal. So shocker, they're much more likely to get arrested for doing the same things that white people do, but twice as likely to get pulled over. Take the late Walter Scott, who was pulled over for having a broken taillight, only to be shot 5 times in the back by a cop. Stop 6, police brutality. Police brutality is front and center of the race conversation right now. Twice a week in the US, white officers kill black suspects, most of whom are unarmed. And the consequences are minimal, if any. Might even get paid a bunch of money for it. The police themselves admit to widespread usage of excessive force and racial bias. So what does America do? Oh, just give them military supplies, of course. Tanks, protective gear, firepower used in war, all the while wagging a finger at protesters that dare to be outraged by it. Sadly, this is all just the tip of the racism iceberg. We really need to ask ourselves, what's really causing the problems that we're observing in America? What advantages has white America been given, often without even realizing it? The first step in combating racism, and often the hardest step, is acknowledging it, acknowledging that the system is unfair. Racism is a powerful institution built by 400 years of slavery, 100 years of outright discrimination, 50 plus more years of covert discrimination. A legacy that long in the making doesn't just disappear overnight. America got a lot of work to do. Links down below to some voices that you should definitely be following, as well as sources and lots more information for your thirsty brains. Lots of love, y'all. I'll see you next time. Mwah!
All right, that was my girl Lacey. So what are your thoughts? What do you think about what Lacey had to say? Do you agree with some of the things she said?
A lot of the things she said were like, oh, I'm sorry, Denise, go ahead, go ahead.
It's okay, go ahead.
Are you sure?
We'll get you both.
Sorry. I think a lot of what she said, like it was very valid, you know? Like a lot of what she said wasn't new to me. I'm very aware of like the history of racism in America and basically the role that it has played in our government, in our criminal justice system, in our economy, and also like just in terms of like housing as well and all of that stuff. And all of that is still very true today. Unfortunately, people of color still experience this and they still have very limited options when it comes to where they can live or what's available to them. So the new term that we've heard now is called affordable housing. But who is affordable housing really for? You know, who can afford that? Because poor families who don't, you know, have like, who are not making a salary and basically, you know, still need assistance from like the government paying for their rent or whatever, they wouldn't necessarily qualify for that kind of affordable housing. Affordable housing today is more for individuals who have like graduated from college, have been working in their career field for a while, and let's say you finally made that break where you can make like a good, decent living wage, where you can finally move out of your parents' house and move into your own place. But even then, those individuals are still struggling, because when you go from moving out of your parents' house and you're a working class, everyone in the middle working class it doesn't benefit you because you get taxed the highest amount. The rich like get taxed a fixed amount, and then the poor get taxed like very little. But the ones who get taxed the most is everyone who is working class, middle class, because you're single, you don't have any kids, you're not married, and you don't really have anything. So the way they see is that they can just tax you like no tomorrow. So I feel like still today, communities of color, especially students who graduate from college and come from families where their parents have never received a college education, where wealth isn't really like a thing in your family, and you're trying to build that for yourself, it's very difficult. So that's a lot what I've seen. And I've seen a lot of my friends who graduate and they're still living with their parents even after graduation. And most of them weren't able to move out until like maybe 7 years or like 5 years of like living with their parents after college because of like the effects that you experience. And even when you move out, like I said, like if you're working class, it's very, very scary because you fear that you can go right back to like being poor again because you still don't make enough to afford a certain amount of like amenities and even just like affordable housing. So it's just, for me, I feel like, I don't know. And then with all of these upzonings, I know that everyone has heard the term upzoning. That also affects communities of color very heavily because again, who are you upzoning? You're upzoning communities of color. You're taking that property, reselling it, making like a value off of it, and then giving those places to live to people who can actually pay like full rent and not a subsidized portion of rent. So still redlining people of color still today, I feel. At least those are like the examples that I can give of what I've seen.
That's great. Thank you. I mean, you're absolutely right. There are huge adverse impacts for communities of color in every dynamic, in every opportunity, whether it's economic or health disparities or housing disparities or educational disparities, education achievement gaps. And then when you start collapsing groups like women of color, for example, those impacts are even greater than just the general women versus men population and folks of color versus white folks population. So yeah, when you look at intersectionality, it definitely exacerbates it. So thank you for that. Anybody else? Any other thoughts about Lacey's video, Lacey's perspective on race and racism? I know we lost someone who was, she was trying to talk right before Tiana.
Denise, where are you, Denise?
Did she go? Yeah, I think we lost her. All right, so we're definitely going to have to bring her back when we get her back. Hopefully she comes back. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to pop in another video.
Hey, can I talk real quick? Sorry,
Please,
yeah.
no, please. Yeah. Can you pronounce your name for me?
It's Chrisnificent, like that, magnificent.
Got it, Chrisnificent.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, some magnificent. Cool. Yeah. So based on the video was pretty much self-explanatory, and based on what Tiana has said, it's all the facts. And the first year, summer year, Hostos, I took a class in sociology. And one thing that my professor taught me is the practice of sociological imagination. And to me, that always sticks with me because that phrase plays a part in the community that the people of color or people of all color may live in. And I'm going to use in today's example, and it's pretty much the same, to be honest, of cultural competency, because we know that the new president-elect Biden is going to be the new president of the United States for the next 4 years, and many people are protesting. And the thing that people didn't know of the protesters is that the protesters that in favor of Donald Trump is 45 or 95% Caucasian white people who voted over the Trump, believing that basically actually he did was okay. But in the beginning of 2020 was not an easy year, to be honest, because in the beginning of March, we lost a black man by the name of George Floyd, who was being killed by an officer's neck. And in the news, I'm not sure it's true or not, it says that one of the officers got on bail and went to a different place where nobody could find him. And it's really messed up because, to be honest, Black Lives Matter, but to be honest, all lives matter, because it's really not easy seeing a black man die in the hands of police force, excessive force used by NPD. And to be honest, it's really getting me tight, because when I was 15, I want to become an NYPD explorer. I did that program briefly. I didn't finish it. I want to finish it, but to be honest, people talk about defunding the police, and to be honest, it's not really right answer to defund the police. The right answer is the police have more access to counseling, more money for X, Y, and Z. Because I took a course this year that I recently finished. I took my final on it of the class criminal justice, and one of the professors told me that police use too much discretion, more of people of color, and he told me that one drug dealer in New Jersey was about to come all the way from New York to sell a 45 gram of heroin or cocaine to another seller. And by the time he arrived, he was one time he was halfway there. He didn't finish it because the cop pulled him over and has reasonable suspicion that he was under the influence of drugs. They opened the back of his trunk of his car and found a book bag containing 45% of marijuana, and because of that, he get harsh sentence for distributing and selling drugs, illegal drugs over property, state property, which is from New Jersey to New York. Yeah, and the fact that basically China says that many people of color do have more access to education, lack of X, Y, and Z, and to be honest, that's kind of a bit racist, because to be honest, it depends on the people, it depends on the person, to be honest, because on sociology, everyone has a different mindset. Maybe it's the same. Some make chief, some may lives, but to be honest, that's not the right answer, because what I've seen in my life is that a person go to Mississippi or Alabama, like I said before, in Texas, not many people who are white is rich. Some of them are, but some of them not. See the KKK, this and this. That's what sociology plays a part in that's the discussion of what we're talking about. Because many people be saying X, Y, and Z, but that's not the answer, to be honest. Because many people who support Trump is middle class or low class Caucasians. You never see a black person support him. Some black minorities support Trump, but that does not mean that he's going to become the next president of the United States of America. He's saying that, Donald Trump is saying that he wants to become president for this one of the reasons. But how many people died over the COVID-19 pandemic? No one has suggested that. The problem he did is that he attacked the FBI, and to us, I love the FBI. I want to work the FBI. In fact, he attacked the Department of Justice, go really big consequence. But this is a topic that, like Tim be saying, is that black people don't have more access, with more to Caucasian or this and this. But that's a bit racist, because to be honest, not only black people suffer not making too much money. Too much all people with Spanish, Latino, Mexican, Puerto Rican, every people suffer from this cause. So that's what sociology plays a part, but in this discussion. So
you're absolutely right, Chris Nicholson. Thank you. You have a lot of things to say, and I really appreciate there's so many nuggets of wisdom you threw in there from the Sociological Imagination, which was a great book. And if you all don't know, you should definitely check it out. The Sociological Imagination. I think it was it E. Franklin? No, C. Wright Mills, I think, wrote the Sociological Imagination. It's been so long since I've read that book, but great book if you haven't read it. But I think you're right. There are lots of impacts that criminal justice plays out, racism plays out in the criminal justice system, how discretion of officers does have adverse impact in African American and other communities of color. Like we know that African American men are 6 times more likely to be killed by the police. Hispanic men are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than the general population. So yeah, there's absolutely adverse impact and discretion about how that plays out. And the one thing you talked about too, about the percentage of African Americans or folks of color who have voted for Donald Trump, just factually, the number of African American men voted for Donald Trump 4 years ago as compared to this year actually grew. Thank you, Tiana, I appreciate it. C. Wright Mills. The percentage of Hispanics that voted for Donald Trump also grew. And so we typically think that there is this dynamic that Donald Trump's population is a white, uneducated population. However, there has been data to show that it is not just a white working class, lack of education population that's voted for him. That many whites with college degrees, many folks of color, some additional folks of color with degrees, African Americans down south, which have just historically been Democratic strongholds, have actually changed their vote for Donald Trump. So again, how this has manifested, how race has manifested, or how people's experience have manifested is something that we have to hold out, that we can't make these generalizations about all Black people this, all women this, all Latinos this, all white folks this, right? We have to really begin to look and examine the evidence and really see things and explore our own biases and perceptions of what we want to believe or what we see with our eyes as to be the truth. But then when we look at the data doesn't play that out. So it's kind of like the F exercise that we did today, right? We all looked at the F exercise and we thought we saw something, but then the data showed us something very different. So just it's important to just keep that in mind when we start to make our generalizations. All of us, we do it. I do it every day. As a sociologist by training, I do it all the time. But it's also very important that we're checking our own assumptions of what we know to be true. The other thing that I heard between Tiana, who's talking about redlining and the structural stuff, and then Chris Nicholson started talking about racism manifesting both individually and structurally. There's a video that I want to kind of pair both of what you just talked about and kind of gives, just give it a little bit a different perspective. So I'm going to put this on. I want to hear what you have to say, and then we will have a quick discussion before I put you into your breakout groups. All right, so give me 1 second. Okay, current slide.
Moving the race conversation forward. You've probably noticed that when our news media talks about race, when they talk about racism, when they talk about racial justice issues, they quite often talk about it all wrong. But have you ever tried to quantify exactly how and why the media gets it wrong about race and what we can do to fix it? Well, there's a new paper published by Race Forward entitled Moving the Race Conversation Forward that sets out to do just that by compiling nearly 1,200 articles from major newspapers and cable news outlets and systematically breaking down the most common mistakes we fall into when we talk about race. And in their research, Race Forward identified 7 harmful practices, the 7 most common bad habits in media coverage of race, as well as recommended strategies to get us back on track. And I recommend reading all 7 for yourself, but right now I want to focus on just one of the biggest traps that racial justice conversations fall into, which is our tendency to focus too much on individuals instead of systems. Because when we talk about race, when we talk about racism, when we talk about racial justice, it's important to remember that there are levels to this thing. There are at least 4 different levels of racism that each need to be considered. The first level is internalized racism, which is all the prejudice, bias, and blind spots you might have within yourself as an individual. The next level after that is interpersonal racism, which is what happens when we act out that internalized racism on each other. Those 2 levels, the internalized and the interpersonal, are the 2 individual levels of racism. And those are the simplest ones to focus on, the easiest to recognize in our day-to-day lives, the ones we spend most of our time talking about, but I'm here to tell you, there's something else. systemic racism. Once you get past those individual levels, first of all, you have to deal with institutional racism. The racist policies and discriminatory practices in schools and workplaces and government agencies that routinely produce unjust outcomes for people of color. And when you step beyond that level, you have structural racism, the unjust, racist patterns and practices that play out across the institutions that make up our society. The individual and systemic levels of racism are both important, both necessary to reckon with, and they're both usually interrelated. But if you want a real, fully clear-sighted conversation on racial justice, you have to be talking about both levels. And one of the most common ways we fail to see the big picture on race is by failing to think about systemic racism, by failing to be systemically aware. In their research, Race Forward found that our media coverage far too often falls into that trap. They found that approximately 2/3 of race-focused media coverage fails to consider how systemic racism factors into the story. 2/3 of their coverage of race fails to be systemically aware. And that is a problem. When we constantly focus only on individual stories, it distorts our sense of how racism works. It encourages us to see racism only as the product of overt, intentional racist acts by individuals that can be fixed simply by shaming and correcting those individual defects. And it encourages us to see individual stories of transcending racism as proof that there is no more racism. That if we have a black president and Oprah is a billionaire, then there must not be anything else to talk about. And any problems that other people of color still face must be due to deficiencies on their part. It must be a problem with them instead of a problem with the system. And that is no, just no. We cannot have a real, thorough conversation about incarceration rates for people of color, about the thousands of families torn apart by our immigration policies, about the perennial disparities in education, housing, healthcare, employment opportunities. We cannot have real talk about any of the biggest issues that affect us all as individuals if we are not also thinking about the systems involved. We cannot have a discourse that brings us closer to racial justice without being systemically aware. So next time you listen to the news or read the news or watch the news or surf the news, you should take a minute to ask yourself, is this coverage systemically aware? And read Race Forward's new research paper entitled Moving Our Race Conversation Forward for more on these issues and for intervention strategies to help us have some real talk about racial justice.
All right. So what do we think about that one? Anybody? Do we like it? Not like it? Too heavy? Not heavy enough?
I liked it. And like again, yeah, like I like how the video broke down the difference when we're like in media, and basically how racism gets covered. I watched a TED Talk by a man named Baratunde, and he spoke similarly to what this gentleman just spoke about in his video, and how he collected a collection of headlines over the course of 2 years. And actually, no, he collected these headlines over the course of his 4 years in college. And this was because when he graduated from high school in his senior year, one of his teachers told him to start making like a record of whether or not racism is being reported correctly. And then when acts of racism occur, or there are issues with cops or things like that, and like the cops mistreating people of color, to also get those headlines and see who was the person who made those reports. And from this collection that he had of over 4 years, when he presented it on his TED Talk, basically it was when they looked at the list of people who had predominantly called the cops and why these situations occurred or why they arose. And he took like all the headlines from newspapers, magazines, online articles, and saw that the majority of the people who were reporting these like calls or whatever, and he calls it Becky. So the story was of a white woman named Brooklyn Becky, who spent her time calling the cops on several different people of color within her community because they simply looked suspicious to her, and she didn't believe that they had any business being in her neighborhood. Although several of those individuals, like, they were stopped by the cops, but one girl was visiting her best friend in the building next to the woman lived in. And you know, it's kind of outrageous, but you think like, wow, this woman is so ridiculous, because the thought didn't cross your mind that possibly she could have a friend in the neighborhood. And even more so, the woman was surprised that her friend was like white, and it's like, why is that a surprise? Black and white people can be friends. And she has every right to go visit that neighborhood, whether she was visiting a friend or wasn't visiting a friend. Walking on the sidewalk is public property. And the way that this girl got the cops called on her was simply because she was waiting for her Uber downstairs in front of the building. So the woman in her apartment was watching this girl the entire time, and she found her suspicious. So she called the cops and she said, there's this suspicious Black woman in front of my building. She's been there for about 10 minutes. And I think she's trying to maybe rob someone or whatever. And the cops show up, start interrogating this poor girl who's just waiting for her Uber and just finished visiting her friend. She had every reason in the world to be in that neighborhood, but it was just the audacity, the fact that she just got the cops called on her simply because she was waiting for her Uber to arrive. That is ridiculous. So he labeled that story "Waiting While Being Black." And then he did several other stories where it's driving while being Black. What happens when people of color get pulled over by officers, like white officers? And then explained another situation that happened where someone got pulled off on the interstate, and gave an example about that. And he even spoke about himself, how he got pulled over because his girlfriend is white, and they were driving in his parents' car. In her parents' car. And that's because his car was in the shop and it wasn't ready yet. So someone, I guess, on the road driving or whatever, felt the need to call the cops because they found it suspicious that a Black man was riding in a semi-fancy car. And when they gave the report or whatever, the interstate police pulled him off. They were still on the highway, but pulled him off on the interstate and was license and registration, and wouldn't explain why he was being pulled over or anything. And then at the end, when they found out, and they were like, well, this vehicle isn't registered to your name. And then, they didn't want to hear what his girlfriend had to say, although it was her parents' car. And she was like, what are you doing? He has permission to be driving this car. My parents were literally going up to my parents' house to go visit them now to return the car. So it was just outrageous. Simple things like that, where people and it's sad because this man was just in his car driving, and this was another driver who just thought it was just, I guess, suspicious that a Black man was driving in a fancy car and just couldn't believe it, felt the need to call the police, and just how fast and quickly the police moved too. He was in shock. He was literally, it was a phone call that someone made from their car on the highway, and then within a matter of seconds he's being pulled over by interstate police. Was ridiculous. I was just so wowed and left in awe by the whole TED talk and his experience and everything. But just things like that. It's when we fail to report the stories of racism and how they happen, why they happen, who was the person responsible for said incidents occurring in the first place. So I think that is very important, because oftentimes these stories do not get reported correctly. They're not highlighted or spoken about in the best fashion, so it doesn't encompass the whole situation. It encompasses parts of the situation.
You're absolutely right. Thank you, Tiana. And Tiana raises a couple of great questions that I want to ask you. So in that case of someone calls the police show up, the police act out on the call of information that they receive. They're doing their jobs. Who's to blame for that? We often know many of those instances when the police come and it has an impact in African-American communities, or specifically African-American men and women, both, right? But if we're talking about they show up at a community and then that goes off the rails and someone gets killed or shot or Police generally will get off. Whose fault is that? Where does that lie? And or what do we do about it? Right. So here we have an example of institutional racism playing itself out and internalized racism playing out in an interpersonal level. What do we do? What do you think? What you all are the next generation of leaders. What do we do about that? What are your ideas? How do we solve that? What do you think we can do about that? Is it the police officer's fault for doing their job, for showing up because they got a phone call from someone who may have had a racist, implicit bias assumption that was just wrong, or racist, or classist, or sexist, or homophobic? You know, there's someone gay downstairs who shouldn't be there, or someone who's poor who shouldn't be there, or, you know, whatever their bias is, whatever their ism is that's playing out, and they make that phone call to the operator and the police shows up to do their job. You know, here we have the ism playing out on multiple levels, on an interpersonal level and on a systemic level. What do we do about that? What do you think we can do about that?
Hello.
Orlando, is that your hand, Orlando?
Hi.
Or, oh, hi, Yanira.
I just want to say something. I did a project from my politics. I don't know if that well pronounced. And it was about police brutality. And I was asked to find a solution and present it, right? I was based on George Floyd's case. And to answer your question, I think everything, if I base my answer in that case, everyone was was blamed about what happened, because the guy that called the police for a 20 bill, a 20 fake bill, he has his bias, but the police, they were doing their job. That's true. But if you are educated, you can educate the population too. And the system as such, it is like, it's messed up, because if there is something called qualified immunity that allow police to, that allow a death to happen, and like give freedom a police officer. I'm sorry. The system is not supposed to give a prize a person that committed a crime, right? Law is law. A crime is a crime. So if the system doesn't punish a crime just because you are an officer or a government representative or whatever, then you are having a problem. You are sending a message. So I believe that if a police officer if an officer kills someone, and the system give him the punish that is supposed to have because of a crime, then the message is understood. But if something like that happen, and just because the person is Black, and there is no punishment after that, then it is okay for you. That's the message that you are saying, okay? If it's something like it's how you educate everyone. So if taking that example, if he was doing his job, I'm talking about George Floyd, I understand that he can do his job, but there is a procedure that officers are supposed to follow. And even though he's not following the procedure, what about the other officers that were near him? So it is a matter of education from the population, from those that are supposed to keep public safety, and the system as well. So
Thank you, Yanira. I think you're absolutely right. I think, we're looking at how, in this case with the police officer, being charged or having discretion, not being held to the same rules, also being part of a union that has the power to have resources to protect that police officer. And this happens over and over and over again when we look at the disparate rates of which men of color are arrested and tried and found guilty at much higher rates than other communities. So yeah, I think there's a combination of factors playing out. We can talk about training, procedural trainings that need to change, processes that need to change, laws that are written that have too much discretion and too many loopholes in them. The type of access to attorney and legal representation for some folks of color that has classist implications for low and moderate income communities, which also means Black and brown communities. Lots of adverse impact playing out here, right? And then people having different perceptions about who's a criminal and who's not a criminal, what is perceived, who is perceived to be legitimate, how folks have privilege that they can get away with things in some communities and not in others. Yeah, lots of double standards, you could say, right, that are playing out in different communities here. Anybody else have any thoughts? Crime is a crime no matter who commits it. They are doing their job, but 8 minutes. Yes, Yanira, yeah, that was absolutely right. And you know, that George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd had become such a reckoning, a worldwide reckoning to police brutality.
But you know why? I'm sorry to interrupt. You know why?
Please.
You know
Why is
why?
that?
Because that was the first time a death was recorded, and that because talking about qualified immunity, it is their way to be protected when they have to decide or a crime happened and they were like deciding what to do and something bad happened, but it wasn't it was unintentional, right? Unintentional. So George Floyd, unintentional, 8 minutes, unintentional by accident. Come on. And a lot of them happen.
You said the magic words. I'm sorry, Anita.
No, go ahead, girl.
100%. The magic words, like 8 minutes, really?
Exactly. That's
unacceptable.
Exactly. That was George Floyd came to this level because that was as Will Smith said before, a lot of death had happened before. It is just that is the first time that is being recorded, right? So many times there's many videos out there of police brutality, but this is the first time that you can say 8 minutes accidentally. Come on. That's and still he's released, right?
Yeah. I mean, these are good questions, and these are some of the questions that I'm posing at you. I would say that there are we get to the place where we try to make it's easy to make generalizations about police officers, right? That it's hard to say that all police officers are racist, and just as bad to say that all African Americans or all people of color are criminals, right? That we make these generalizations about police and we make these generalizations about all communities, right? And so if we're doubling down and looking at things just empirically, right, we know that there's absolutely an adverse impact. And this was not the first man of color to be killed by the police. Breonna Taylor, African-American woman, right? We can go to Trayvon Martin. I mean, we all witnessed Trayvon Martin's death, how that happened. We watched that and his killer gets off. And so this isn't the first time. Why do you think that George Floyd's death served as such a catalyst? Why now? Do you think it was because of the duration, that it was almost 9 minutes and we got to witness it? Do you think that's the reason why there was this systemic change or this push for the Black Lives Matter movement to be front and center for the last 9 months? What are your thoughts about that?
I have to say, I feel like the moment when America went into shock was because it was the moment that I went into shock too. This was before they, took down the video, and because it was too graphic, it was being reported and flagged as too graphic. So when I first saw the video and it came across my screen, I actually cried. I cried and I became just so upset, like so much anger within myself. And it was just more so because like, I just couldn't believe that this could still like happen in modern day America. But even more so, the moment that hurt the most, where I feel like everyone felt it, was if you saw the video and watching it for those 8 minutes and you're literally at the edge of your seat, you're shaking, you want to like throw up, like you feel like nervous and everything all at the same time. It's just uneasy feeling. And seeing this man on camera literally like just beg and like plead and say that he couldn't breathe, and you could see the life kind of leaving his body and how red his eyes got. Like, I don't know who the person was, but there was a person who like laid down on the floor with their phone and recorded his face, like the last moments. And as he's gasping for air in his last moments, seeing him tear, and there's tears literally running down the side of his face, and he yells for his mother. He calls his mom's name before he leaves this world. Before he is out like a light, the first person's name he called is his mom, the same woman who brought him into this world. And when you see that, and more as a woman, that hurts, because if you're a mother, that just touched your heartstrings like no tomorrow. If
Right.
that you gave birth to, that you put into this world with all of your force, your might, and your love, and then to have their life snuffed out by another person unmercifully, and then call it an accident, that it's unintentional. Sitting on someone's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds is not unintentional. You had every intent. You knew what you were doing. You knew the pressure you were applying. There is no excuse. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. For me, there's no discussion. It's an open and closed case.
I appreciate your passion, Tiana. I really do. And so I pose this question. So what do we do? So you've got this catalyst, right? We have this social catalyst that we can see, right? Philando Castile was sitting in his car. He gets shot live on Facebook Live, right? They still didn't have the catalyst that George Floyd just triggered protests all over the world, right? We saw the injustice, right? And for us, it's plain, it's simple. We all saw it with our own eyes, right? And remember, when we started this workshop today, we looked at a sentence. We looked at one sentence. And all of you saw something very different looking at one sentence. Here we are now looking at a almost 9 minute killing of an unarmed Black man at the knee of a police officer. And I'm quite sure when that case goes to trial, it's going to be madness. Our country will be divided. We are already polarized. People will see that the officer did nothing wrong. They will try to find everything wrong to throw at what George Floyd's history or pattern or whatever, every other mistake he may have made in his life will be put on front display, right? So what do? You all are the next generation of leaders. You have to help solve this problem. What actions do we need to take? What do we need to do about this? Because what has happened in the past is like people will watch this, right? They will say this is unjust. Rodney King, people watch Rodney King get the sense beat out of this man on the streets in LA. And all of a sudden he deserved it because he was driving around speeding and blah, 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 blah. So he deserved to be beat up the way he did, right? Detroit, I mean, we can talk event after event after event, and people get excited, people will rally, and then what changes? So I'm asking you, how does this become a clarion call for change? You all are going to be in positions of power to do something different. Monsita, you had thoughts?
I was gonna say something. I think the issue isn't that we don't want change. I think the issue is that people are feared to make change. We're feared to get gunned down and shot because we're colored. Back then we had Martin Luther King, you had Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, people who fought and taught people how to fight. In this era, there's nobody doing that. Yes, we rally, but like you said, it doesn't go any farther than that. Due to fear, we're afraid that a police officer is gonna come and just do what they did to Floyd or they did to Breonna and shoot us for no reason. I think the problem is fear.
Thank you. You know what? I think you're absolutely right, Monsita. And I have to tell you, I'm putting some names in the chat right now of people who you said you had Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I'm sitting here truthfully every day, and I do my job every day, and I'm seeing some fearless, strong leaders right here who are community activists, who are passionate and able to make a difference, right? So I'm asking you, that you're saying that you had all these people. I'm looking at these people. I'm putting some of their names in the chat right now. We're talking about social change, right? You started this saying that you all wanted to be leaders, yes? You joined this Leadership Academy because you saw yourself as leaders, yes? Is that fair? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, thank you, Monsita. I appreciate it. Right? You all are the next generation of leaders. This is what we're talking about. Yes, we are absolutely afraid of consequences. And is that reason enough to not take action in the face of injustice? That's a question we have to sit within, we have to contend with. You signed up to be leaders, whether you wanted it or not. That responsibility is yours. You chose to be in a program that's going to sharpen your toolkit so that you can make social change. We're not just talking about social change because it sounds good and it feels good, and we have rhetoric technicians of people who can just say nice things, but there's a list of 20 people right here that are leaders, strong, powerful. Like, I heard Tiana open her mouth and the passion just like exudes, right? I mean, Monsita, I heard you say something, all of a sudden I'm like stood up straight. I'm like, you can't help but feel the passion come out of your mouth, right? Chris Nificent starts talking about C. Wright Mills and macro sociology and micro sociology and police brutality in the same sentence. Who does that? Like, seriously, like you all are talking about being the next generation. What does that look like now? Like, what do? You have a clarion call, you witnessed it, you can't unsee that anymore, right? You see that 8 minutes and 50 seconds, whatever it was, disgusting display of quote unquote policing that killed George Floyd. People all over the world see this as injustice, and then there are going to be people that are going to defend these police officers. They're still going to keep, some of them will keep their jobs, and they're going to be like, this is okay. Like, why is that okay? What do you do?
It's okay because that's how a lot of cities in America are conditioned.
Okay.
I want to take it back to what we said a little bit earlier. There's systemic racism. Now, there's also systemic conditioning where people are taught to live their lives a certain way, which is why when you saw George Floyd on the floor, you see people taking out their phones instead of trying to jump that police officer.
Yep.
I want to take it back to Egypt, where in Egypt, if you get into, let's say, a street fight or even a fight with the law or an officer or anything like that, what happens is first the people break it up. After they break it up, they see what happened, what was going on, and why you guys are fighting in the first place. They don't take out their phones. They probably don't even have phones to take out, but it's something that comes, I guess, naturally over there, that it's kind of like a fear for their fellow people, their fellow man. So I think it also comes from not only the conditioning that comes from the government, but it also comes from the conditioning of luxury. A lot of people out there may not have as much as what we have or what people around the US have. So it comes down to a lot of different factors. And I think that what it is that a lot of people have gotten comfortable with not doing anything or being on the side. Now, I understand we have rallies and we have to do things a certain way because we have laws that are different from other countries, but it all comes down to primal instincts. When you have an instinct that something is wrong, you should act on it. And I'm not saying to go throw yourself on a cop who's hurting someone else, but it comes down to you can break something up. You know, you don't have to break the law in order to intercede. So, I mean, I don't know what else to say or how to say it without being disrespectful. So I'm going to stop right there. And,
I appreciate that, Mustafa. I appreciate that very much. Monsita also makes a great point, right? Because fear is a big concern, and in some communities, it's a very valid concern, right? Because people's safety, they have to still live there. If they see something that's inappropriate, there may be consequences. There may be backlash, right? There may be retaliation for people who stand up and do something, you know, in the face of like crime or oppression or anything by the police or by whomever. These are serious concerns, all right? And so we have to think about how do you strategically and carefully and mindfully, like, can you make a difference here, or how can you do it without one, putting yourself in harm's way? Doesn't mean you're right, like Mustafa, like you have to throw yourself on a police officer or fight it. But there might be ways where, you know, taking out a camera might be the only way in which you can do something. All right, it's like that gentleman in Staten Island. My brain's not working.
Eric Garner, right?
Eric Gardner, thank you. Right, and so the brother who broke out the camera recorded Eric Garner's murder, right? And then the police officer, 5 or 6 years later, eventually gets fired, but it took 5 or 6 years of him being on desk duty, still getting a paid check, and his police union sticking up for him. But the young brother who was shooting the video eventually gets arrested himself by the police, being targeted, right? So yeah, are there consequences to Monsita's concern? Absolutely valid. Mustafa, yeah, I think there are some times where people are conditioned, just to break out their camera. They don't want to get involved. They'll see a fight right in front of them and they'll just start videotaping and egg it on, and no one wants to stand up and say that this is not okay. You're absolutely right.
Wait. I'm sorry about that. Wait, so you said, this is kind of sounds ridiculous, but you said that the man who videotaped Eric Garner gets arrested by the cops.
Yes,
then why would the cops use excessive force on Eric Garner? You know, he said many times he cannot breathe. So the police did a stupid thing. They're not supposed to arrest the man to videotape the action. You know, the action was not supposed to be used excessively. It's basically basic psychology, basic strategy. That's like the police basically wrong. The guy did the right thing, videotaping it, because the police not supposed to use mad extra on Eric Garner. Even though he's like big, 6'5", middle-aged man, not supposed to use extra force and not use the headlock, because he's the headlock. That's a military way of killing a people, used mostly in the Marine, in the Army, and he used that against a civilian individual. It's messed up though. Like
it's messed up, but at the end of the day, they did it because, again, fear. I have power to arrest you, so you do not leak this video, so you do not continue saying I have proof that you did this.
That's right.
That's why that gentleman got arrested. It wasn't because he wasn't doing anything. The police officer knew he was wrong, and he used his power to the best of his ability to try to shut this man up.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And we've seen time and time, we have seen many examples of bystanders or civilians who have taken video of police officers doing their job, and the police officers, depending, not all, some, the rogue ones, right? Not all, but those many police officers who have pushed and made an example out of people who were videotaping, to snatch their cameras, break the cameras, do something to show their force because they could get away with it. And they knew they could get away with it and would be backed by a police union and a system that's not looking to punish the police, but to protect the police, right? But meanwhile, their job is supposed to be protect the community, not the police, but the community. So yeah, Monsina's making a great point.
If I see someone about to blow up a hospital or about to blow up some kind of building that has other people inside of it, and I take out my phone instead of trying to do something to stop it, I would say that I should be just as responsible as the person that's about to blow up that building. Unless
you have to,
that person,
you
that
have to
person is
agree to
understanding
disagree.
that not only am I about to, he's about to blow up that hospital, but now I'm just taking out my phone when I have the power to at least push that person off or push that person, make that person stumble for a second. I should be just as responsible as that person that's blowing up that hospital.
Yeah, I think what I hear Monsita saying, Mustafa, is I think we can have a both and here. I think there is a point that each one of us has to make a decision about what our comfort level is, right? And where we feel safe. Some of us may have kids back home. Some of us may have a child or a parent, or someone may not be able to physically run, or whatever the case is, but if there is something that they can do that will help in the prosecution of that case, help put information out there for that case, if there's a way to help, then great. And at the same time, I have also been a victim of a violent attack, and there was no one around, or there was someone who sat and watched and didn't do anything. And I'm like, well, I wish someone would have either picked up a video or done something and not just sat there and watched, right? And so I can understand both sides. And I don't know that there is just one right answer here. I think people, if you can find a way to get involved, if you can find a way to make a difference, that way is going to look different for each one of us. Mustafa, you might be the one that's going to run in and make a difference physically, literally, right? Monsita might be more rational in her thought process in the moment, to think a little bit clearer in the moment, to say, what can I do, instead of, fire, ready, aim. She could be ready, aim, fire. And so we have to just, again, understand that people are going to come to this from different perspectives, right? And we have to honor and value those different perspectives on what's right and what's the best way to proceed here. And what I'm asking you to recognize for yourselves is, one, do you see it's important and recognize the importance to make a difference, to have a change, to be part of the solution, right? And recognize that there are multiple ways and multiple solutions that can all be helpful and appreciated, and that we can value and respect people from where they are and how they approach this. If someone can say that my way of contributing would be to teach my students, or show or demonstrate or tell my students what happened and inspire change within them, then they're making a difference in the world. If it's someone who goes and literally may go after the person who's trying to blow up the hospital, then that might be another way. And people, I think, are all going to see and feel like it's important to get involved in that situation, but there has to be multiple there are multiple solutions in this scenario, and that there's not just one that's better than others, and that we have to honor where people are and what they feel they can and can't do in that situation. And if someone has training, if someone's in good shape, if someone has martial arts training, or if someone has boxing skills or those types of skills, and they want to do that, by all means, go ahead and do it, right? But I know that not everybody is a good fighter, physical fighter. Not everyone is fast. Not everyone's that coordinated. Not everyone can do that, and someone as a skill may be to be able to have a camera to help prosecute what happened, and that tool is going to be needed as well, because not everyone's a good photographer. Fair? So we have to kind of look at what is that each one of us can do and each one of us can bring, and value and respect that. Does that make sense? Mustafa, thoughts? Monsita, thoughts?
I mean, I do agree with Mustafa for the simple fact of Junior, everyone recorded and nobody actually sat there and helped him. So in that sense, yes, everyone, even the two nurses that walked by him, no one helped that child, and he made it literally to the hospital and he still died. But like in other senses, I'll give an example. My boyfriend's Black, and he was brutally attacked by police officers for misidentity. They broke a bone where it was, now he has to walk around with a metal plate just because he was of color and just because he fit the description. Understand? As well as we do a lot of bike events with children, and because we're colored people, there's always police there's always police following us, and all it is just kids riding bicycles from one borough to another peacefully. But let it be a white community doing a bike rally, there won't be police presence.
Mhm. Yeah, there are plenty. And first off, I'm sorry to hear about your partner. You know, and there are so many countless, excuse me, unfortunate examples of that. I mean, someone bird watching getting called. You know, it's ridiculous from the simplest things to to the most obscure things, and we see this happening over and over again. I saw a video last night or 2 nights ago of a woman that the Chicago police went into her home and raided her home. She was completely naked. They had the wrong address, and they were there for half an hour, like just humiliating her. She's screaming, "You had the wrong address. There's no one by that name. I live by myself." And that could have been horrific, but misidentity, wrong address, and it was just okay for them to go in and abuse and tear her home up. Like there are absolutely cases of this happening over and over again. And I just need you to understand that yes, these things happen systemically. This stuff plays out: systemic sexism, systemic racism, heterosexism, and we need to stand up and be allies to each other. We need to be supportive and aware that this stuff happens. We need to listen and understand and recognize and respect people's experience. And just because you don't see it happening doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because you may not see it being a big deal doesn't mean it's not a big deal. And folks like us from our communities, especially in our city, which is as diverse as it is, I mean, there are things that we kind of, like we talked about from the very beginning, that, Hostos students, CSI students, like we live in this, right? We see this every single day. And we have to recognize that we still are part of this system. We are very much a part of our culture, and means we can be part of the change. And so I would love to ask you to think about, how do you see yourselves going forward? How does leadership become, what does leadership look like for you in your careers that you've chosen? To recognize that cultural competency is such an important quality, skill set that we need to practice and sharpen and be aware of and continue to work and work and work. It's not something that you arrive and say, I've got it, I've learned, but that we have to continuously do this work. When you have 70 million people voting for one candidate and 80 million people voting for another candidate, you can see how clearly divided this country is, that people see things very differently. I'm not saying one is right and one's wrong. I have my opinions, but just looking at the facts just straight, we're looking at a deeply divided country who see things very differently. Right. And so we've got to be able to talk and communicate and work through our challenges together as a nation, as a country, as a state, as a city, and in your case, in your own respective communities. We've got to figure out how to do this together. And that's why it's important for us to do our own work around our own biases, and also to learn and be respectful of other people in our community who may see things differently, who have lived a different experience. And if we're not able to talk to each other and communicate with each other in a way that we can seek to understand one's experience, but also work to challenge our own assumptions and our own biases and our own prejudices, whether that's an internalized stuff or stuff that's learned, or just stuff that we're ignorant to, we've got to figure this out. And I thank you all in advance for the work that you are going to be doing in our communities going forward. I applaud you for your passion. I applaud you for your determination to get an education, to be smart, and to have the skills to know better, to do better. I appreciate your perspectives, your thoughts, your passion, And I hope you can go back and look at that group of leaders that we just put up on that page. That I have expectations. I know Jason does too, because I've always felt his passion for his students. But I mean, you all are clearly destined for greatness. And I can't wait to look back and say, oh, I remember that person because they were in a workshop that we talked about such and such and such and such. But you all are fantastic. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud that you're at our institution. I hope Jason invites me back. And if you have any questions, I would, be happy to answer. If you want more resources, I'll be happy to provide them. But maybe we can pick up another time and talk more about this in another different way. But I hope everybody who celebrates a holiday in the next, either in the past week or the next 3 or 4 weeks, I wish you all happy holidays. There are like 27 international holidays happening over the next month. I hope you all are safe. And if you haven't finished your finals yet, good luck on your finals. I think ours were over this weekend. So if you have a final or a paper left, good luck with that. And thank you for your time today and sharing your passion and your ideas and your thoughts and experience with me. It was great to meet you all.
Give a virtual round of applause for Robert. Ended this workshop on like a super
I gave a virtual clap.
powerful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I think a lot of you said some really important stuff. I'm trying to manage my house. This is why I keep turning it up. And but I think Robert's right. I think what we espouse in our group is that you're not the leaders of tomorrow, but you're the leaders of right now. And a lot of you have taken on that as part of your mantra, and doing the right things and doing important things and making an impact on the societies that you live in, come from, work in, go to school in. And I appreciate you all for doing that. And I appreciate Robert for you coming and being able to have like a frank, really detailed discussion about this. As Robert and I spoke when we were talking about this, that we had this great workshop. It wasn't a workshop. We just had a great meeting in the summer when 70 of us came together and were able to start to have the conversation. So I think it was good that we were able to at least put some more perspective on it. I don't think it's the end of the conversation. I think it's an ongoing conversation, especially for us, where we're from, because it's Hostos, because we represent so many communities, because it's the work that we are all meant to do. By choosing to be part of this group, you are meant to do this work, whether it's on the soil of the United States of America or overseas. And I think what we've proven through all the people who've come and spent some time with us is that we're doing that. And that's really what I'm most proud of, is that I look at your names and your faces here, or when we were together, and I have the vision for you, 10 years down the road. And that's what I constantly have been saying to my colleagues across the university and my colleagues at Hostos. It's not about 2 years. It's not about 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's about, 10 years from now. What are you going to be doing that's making incredible change around the world? And last week we had a political discussion, a panel of politicians with 2 of our alumni who have gone on to work. One works for the New York City Advocate, and another works in the Citizens Complaint Review Board. Those are major positions in the city. And those are 2 students who came from the same seats that you're sitting in, and they're addressing some of these issues. So I want to thank you guys for being here. I have to say that, Stefan, you need to make an announcement real quick. Yeah.
I'm fine, sir.
Do we need to make an announcement about Monday?
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry that I was between work and here, so just listening to the amazing session you all just had. Thank you all for your comments, your insight, and your input, guys. You guys are awesome and amazing. So Monday, we have our holiday singing We are going to be meeting on Zoom Monday at 3:30, and we're going to be singing. We have the song list down. Sending the link for the Zoom meeting right now. We're going to have a short meeting after session right now, and we're just going to discuss a few things for Monday. We are also having ugly sweater contest, so please wear ugly sweaters. And yeah, that's about it from me. Jason?
Yeah, so he didn't mention that he's working on getting some gift cards for the ugly sweater, so be prepared. If you really have an ugly sweater, get it out. It's going to be worth something. And yeah, so the singing is about, we used to go to, for Robert, we used to go to Chinatown, and for every year for like 12 years and sing to senior citizens at the Chinatown Senior Center. We can't go this year because of, the virtual environment. So we're going to create a virtual version of what we do. And hopefully there won't be crying in the background. And so, but we would like everybody to participate. We hope that you'll be able to come out. And I want to honor your time. Thank you. This has been, the fall has been great. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for putting in the time. I sent the link to the links today for registering all the workshops for fall, for the conferences for fall, and for the forums for fall. So please make sure that you're going to do that, and we'll follow up with you. And because we're not going to meet officially, I have to say happy holidays to everybody, whatever it is that you celebrate, however it is that you're going to take a breather from school or get away from everything, relax yourselves, get some rest. If you can come out on Monday, you want to participate with us, that would be great. But if I don't see you before all of these things happen, and the next time we meet is January 11th, then I just want to tell you, I love you and I miss you. I miss being together in our space. And I really treasure the fact that we are able to cut together here on Friday afternoons and spend a little time together. And know that that's part of my blessing. And I've always felt that way. So thank you all for doing that and sharing yourselves with me and all of our guests who come and join us. And Robert, I love you. You're one of the greats. I'm happy to hear you getting your doctorate and you're going to do all these great things. You'll probably be the next president of one of these colleges. And we need smart, talented people like you to lead our institutions. I look forward to it. And so I wish everybody a happy Friday, a good weekend, get some rest, stay away from the snow, stay warm, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Happy holiday.
Bye, Isabel. Bye, Masita. Bye, Andre. Bye, Sarah. Bye, Kiswend. Bye, Stefan. Bye, Fatima. Bye, Abdul. Bye, Leighton. Bye, Rosanna. Bye, Abdul. They say that. Bye, Yanira. Bye, Maria. Good to see you. Rosanna, take care. Robert, thanks, man.
You're very welcome.
All right.
I appreciate you, Jason. Thank you.
Appreciate you too. Take care, man.
All right. Be good.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Robert. Great
You're-
workshop. I love it. Thank you so
You're welcome.
much. We
Isabel,
really
you're welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.